Hi, and welcome to the Uplevel U Music Scale resource. I created this because this is the way that I teach students to play their scales. And I noticed that I've noticed this over the years, that my students tend to approach scales with a very, very different attitude and sense of motivation compared to students that have already learned some of their scales or all of their scales or have a concept about what learning scales is all about. So, basically, all of this started from an experiment where, I would either have students that their first scale experience was with me as a lesson teacher, or I would have students where they've previously learned scales from somebody else, and I have to help continue their education on it. And observing how these tendencies and approaches towards learning um, differed, and especially with the attitudes of students, how all of this differed between these two different demographics of students, and then watching them merge and converge into the same type of attitude, sense of discipline, and then, of course, performance knowledge of scales. I figured I must be doing something right. Actually, I know I'm doing something right because you just watch, even from that very first lesson. Ah, the student is remembering how to do this. If the student is not remembering how to do this, they remember how to figure it out and then they remember how to do it. But it's more than just that. It's about how students maybe ask to do scales first, not just to get it out of the way, but because it's the thing that they feel comfortable doing first in their lessons. Or it's how, when we're preparing for a solo competition, the student is like, well, that's an easy 5 points for me. I'm going to get those perfect. Great. And you know that they're right and that they're going to get all their scales perfect in that audition. Or the students that are like, all right, my scales are done. What do we do with these? And then suddenly you can open them up to the world of chord building or writing music or playing from a lead sheet or something like that. Like, knowing all of your scales is really an amazing, amazing tool that can lead you to so much different types of creative work. So, let's dive right in. I don't know if you've ever seen one of my resources before or have completed one of my Uplevel U Music courses before, but I like to use a lot of slides. And of course, in the package of this resource, you're also going to get some of the teaching tools that you'd be able to use with your students too. This little mini course type of thing, this resource is just into it, kind of dialed down into one singular video that you can watch through and then know exactly what it is that I'm doing right in order to really change your students with this. Okay. All right. So let's dive right in. Let me just share my screen here. That usually takes a couple of seconds. Here we go. Share. All right. That's the one we want. Okay. Okay. So helping students love and appreciate scales. This is for instrumental music teachers. Someday I would like to come out with something more for the vocal teachers for sight singing. That's a resource I plan to have in the future. All right, so the first lesson is like the introduction, just basically how this resource works and what you can expect to get out of it. So, what is this? Uplevel U Music's scale resource isn't so much about a physical product. So, if you've already perused around, you know what I'm talking about. You're basically getting just like 3 sheets with this. It doesn't look like much, but it's all about how you use it. So actually the real gold here is this video that you're watching right now. It's about your sense of delivery as the teacher in charge of instilling this amount of knowledge in your students, okay? Because that's what makes or breaks the students' attitude, motivation, and continuation of this knowledge. Um, in their musical career. It comes from you. So we're going to get right into that because it's kind of where it all starts, right? So, musician or music students' opinion, attitude, and motivation towards scales is all about framing. Okay, so hopefully you know what the word framing is. It's kind of a psychological term. It is in this setting the attitude that the teacher has towards the concept, the explanation of it, the use of knowledge after it is first instructed, and the expressed reasoning to the students as to why it is useful. Okay. Yeah. So there's like a bunch of different parts here. So let's talk about that and break that down a little bit. So it's the attitude that the teacher has towards the concepts. Okay. I want you to think about this for a second. How were you taught scales? Just reflect on that for just a moment. What was the experience like for you? Was it seamless? Was it easy to learn a scale a week or more? Was it something that you were able to remember, or was it frustrating, or did you have to learn it multiple times? Was it something you always kept getting wrong until finally in college you had the knowledge to get it right because you knew you needed it? Here, I'll venture some of that. So, I was taught scales like 4 times. Um, being a piano major, that was my main instrument, still kinda is, I guess. I do a lot with upper strings too, um, and clarinet and, percussion and singing. Yeah, I know, but, like, that's where it all began, piano and upper strings. In piano, I was first taught scales, I think, in 4th grade, and it was like all of them, okay? And I had to keep learning them over and over again, and it wasn't about the notes, it was about the fingerings. Everything was about the fingerings and making sure that my finger patterns were correct, and I wasn't using, like, cheating finger patterns. So for all of those who have learned scales for piano, you know what it is I'm talking about here. And it's true because the fingerings set you up to be able to seamlessly get those notes out. They have to work together. If you think about a string instrument, orchestral strings, there's a finger pattern there too. But the unfortunate part is you learn the finger pattern and you skip what the notes actually are. Eek, that's not good. But let's flip this around and think about winds here. So, wind instruments kind of have a finger pattern. You generally remove fingers to go up the scale and generally add them to go back down. That's very, very loose description, of course. But, like, you have to think about what those fingerings actually are. What is that group of fingers going down or up called? It is called G sharp. It is called D, you know? So we call them something. It's a lot easier to do this for wind instruments, but for other instruments, it is not. And we cannot make sure that we miss that. If we miss that detail of calling the letters of a scale this, if we do that, students are not going to internalize things. And therefore, that's why students have to learn it over and over and over again. Okay. So, in the piano respect, that was me. I learned them for my college auditions. I got them down, but like they still didn't feel good. And I still felt like they could go away. I didn't have a concrete way of thinking through them. It was just sort of like, okay, here I go. And I'd sort of remember the physical cues of when I had to cross fingers. And I could hear it and I could rely on my ear to make me get there without a mistake usually. That wasn't good enough though, especially for somebody who was in charge of already teaching students. So because I started teaching at age 15 actually. So yeah, yeah, I needed something better. And thankfully, my teacher or my professor in college actually was able to make sure that all of us had really good fingering cues and cues of how to teach students scales, at least for piano. So I used that to put that into different avenues, knowing that I was going to be teaching far more than just piano. I needed to refine that to make sure every type of student had some sort of method. But then I also was kind of excited about what scales could open up, especially taking music theory in college. And I'm sure you all experienced that too. All right, what do we do with the scale knowledge? What can we do with it? What does it allow us to create? So I have absolutely used this phrase with students. Once you know all your scales, it literally helps you decode how music and harmony all works. It demystifies it so that you can get into it and create more yourself and know what it's all supposed to be. And I've watched the light bulb go on when students actually experience that. It is a very magical moment. So, that's the attitude the teacher has towards the concept, the first of the 4 parts of framing here, okay? So, when your attitude as a teacher is more like, "Oh my gosh, this is golden knowledge, you need to know this, but it's gonna be fun, and we're gonna enjoy the growth and the process of this," rather than, "Okay, scales, you have to know this. Sorry. I know it's gonna suck." Like, you're already setting students up to not enjoy this, and they're gonna dig their heels in, okay? Like, no, no, make this a game. Have some fun with it because it really is powerful stuff, okay? So, that's part 1. The explanation of it, and that's what we're going to get into, with this video a lot, is how to explain the well, how to get from scale to scale to scale, how to pile them on, how to scaffold your way through it. Okay. So we'll get to that in a moment. It's got to be clear and concise, and I've done all that for you. The use of the knowledge after it's first instructed, basically, how to continue the knowledge after that first scale is taught, how to handle more complicated scales, how to branch off into different direction regarding scales, and how to make sure students aren't forgetting how to create their scales, using their instrument. Okay. So that's important too, is the continuance of it. And then the last part is the expressed reasoning to the students as to why it is useful. So that'll all be handled in this video. Why do this? As an accomplished musician, you know why scales are important. It's our duty as music teachers to convey that to the students in the most positive way possible. Students get the opportunity to compete at regional and state levels. They need to learn scales for this, and they deserve an easy and motivating way to prepare. Okay. So, in addition to that, they might also need it if they want to be a collegiate music major too. Okay. That's imperative. And then we have students look for easy and attainable ways to create music. Teaching scales is the most solid avenue to begin this work. Knowing scales and everything that comes from scales takes a lot of the guesswork and then frustration and trial and error away from the creation of music, whether it's just a harmony part for a friend to play a duet or an entire creation or an arrangement. What is included in this package? Obviously, the video. This video is for the instruction. You have a circle of fifths sheet. Actually, you're getting two of them. One is specifically for piano because it has the fingerings in there, and then you're getting a general one that you can use for really anybody else. It's probably similar to other ones you've seen in the past, but I gotta include it, of course. And mine, definitely can be used for anybody because I've been using it for over a decade. Ideas for motivation, that's part of the video. And then number 4 is the scale practice plan. Practice plans are extremely powerful things. I don't know if you've ever used one, but the more practice plans I feel like I can include in my resources and courses, the less work it will be for you to end up with some success, a lot of success with your students. And that's going to be all you need here. All right, so moving on to lesson 2, introducing or maybe reintroducing scales. I understand that some of you that have this resource, you may have or probably have taught scales before. So this is going to have to be kind of your phase too. Be like, hey, look, I know we gotta review scales, everybody. I'm going to actually show you a different way, and this is going to be even more effective for your scale learning and remembering and helping you feel more confident. Okay, so what I just said, you may want to rewind the video and listen again, because what I just did is I gave you an introduction that you can use in your lessons or rehearsal to help students be encouraged that they have to relearn material and that it's going to be better the second time around. Okay, you don't want to be like, all right, we got to learn scales again. Here we go. And they're like, oh, this again. I hated it the first time. What do I have to do it again? Well, it's something they have to know. You know that. They probably, hopefully, know that. And it's up to you to make sure that this is going to be better and more effective the next time around. Okay. So that framing. All right. The first lesson. So this is going to be how you begin the journey with scales, or re-begin the journey with scales. Certainly take out anything you know that they know, but it's a good idea to review it anyways for people that are actually taking a very fresh start here, because it's relevant and you want them to start with something easy that they know in order to build upon the knowledge. What's the musical alphabet? Usually when I teach scales, a lot of time has passed since we last talked about it. So they're like, okay, this is easy. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I'm like, great. Okay. So you know what all the letters are supposed to be. Now we just change the starting and ending place, and sometimes we'll substitute sharps or flats. That's it. That's building a scale. That's it. I swear to you, that's all it is. So if you've never heard it explained that way, stop and think about that for a second. Okay. So in piano world, I like to start with the C scale because easiest one. At least, even if you disagree and you're like, no, B is because the fingerings. I've actually had somebody tell me that before. Somebody who was a music supervisor for a huge school district actually told me that once in a competition. I never forgot it because I understood it years later. The hands are laid out in a very natural way. but it's not the easiest scale. I know that from teaching. But C, I do believe is. Okay. Now we're talking piano here. Okay. So, starting and ending notes. C scale is called the C scale because it starts with C. It also ends with C. So, we go up through the musical alphabet until we get to C again, and then we go backwards. And on a piano, that's easy because it's just stepping down the keys. On other instruments, it's not as easy because you actually have to think through the letters. And if that seems like to them, your students, that that's a lot of thinking, that's okay because that thinking is learning. It will never be that hard again. Every time that they think through the letters forwards and backwards, it will get easier and they'll get it a lot more seamlessly. Okay. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. Okay. Super easy. Usually by the time they're ready to learn scales, they're pretty easy. That task that I just did is pretty easy, even if it's not as fast as what I just did. Then, if you need to, you teach the fingerings. Okay. For orchestral strings, that's a really, really good idea. Okay. Usually you'll start on the open string scales: D scale, G scale, maybe C scale. Usually C scale is like third. A scale for violin. Let's go with the D scale as our example here. Open 1, 2, 3, open 1, 2, 3. 3, 2, 1, open, 3, 2, 1, open. But do not skip those letters. Okay. What is open called again? Oh, yeah, you better know the answer to that, or otherwise you're going to get that confused with a G scale or a C scale or an A scale. Okay. What is one called? E. All right. So go through the letters instead of the numbers, or do both. Okay. It's so important to make those connections. Let's go with G scale for alto saxophone. Okay. So you play G. All right. It's this. You play A next. All right. The next letter. What's the next letter? Oh, it's B. All right. That's a B. All right, what's the next letter after B? Oh, C. Okay. Now, when you get to F, it's important that we make sure we do an F sharp instead. Okay. So, those first couple scales, the easy ones that are within a student's range. Now, I'm starting to think about trumpet here, because trumpet. How do you start learning teaching scales with trumpet? What do you start on? Do you start on C or do you start on B flat? How about horn? Yeah. Uh, B flat, I think, is usually the first one I do. Sometimes it's A minor, just simply because the notes are easier. Okay. So I make sure I kind of explain things as we go along. I will absolutely appeal to the student's range. But once the range is increased enough that you know that you can get an entire octave for any scale that you need, and make sure you're filling in the gaps of instruction, okay? And using the circle of fifths, you can help them demonstrate where that path is that they're going. So why can't we learn a D scale? Do you know high D yet? So, oh no, yeah, I know we'd have to learn the note first. If they are excited by that, okay, help them teach the note, even if they miss the partial every time. At least if they know the fingering where they're going, it's about two-thirds of the knowledge. They can always work on that themselves. And if they're excited about it, they'll be motivated to do some extensions of their range. Okay. Name the notes in order, forward and backward, for all new scales at least once. It's important. Their verbal recall of all of these scales is imperative for the connection building in the brain. This is the stuff that helps them remember it from lesson to lesson and then henceforward. Okay, so the circle of fifths. How do we get from scale to scale in this way? All right, so we're substituting in sharps and flats. Okay, so for every scale, to get it to sound like it has the same tune, we enter in a certain amount of sharps and flats. Okay, we add one more to the previous list. Okay, so let's start at C. We'll be in piano world again. C, G has one sharp, D has two sharps, A has three sharps. Usually by this point, between D and A, I'm having students use the circle of fifths. If they don't have a circle of fifths in front of them, I have taught them the order of sharps so that they can figure out which sharp is added next. Usually they're like independent and knowledgeable enough to do this all on their own. So they can basically teach themselves their own scales. And then they go to play it for me for the first time, sometimes even hands together, and they get it perfect the first try. And they're amazed at themselves. I'm like, did you think you could do that? And they're like, wait, no. So it's all about the process. It's amazing to watch them be impressed with themselves on that. By the time you get to 5 sharps, it's B, of course, but I think B is a lot easier to think about than C flat, but some wind instrument students may disagree with that. So, B is 5 sharps, that's a lot to think about. But C flat is a C scale with everything made flat. So, like, I sometimes ask about preferences. For G sharp, hmm, for F sharp and G flat, it usually just depends on who's playing what. For pianists, I let them pick whichever one they want. Sometimes we do it both ways. String students like F sharp, wind students like G flat. I still ask, but that's generally what they pick. C sharp or D flat, that's a funny one because I have some wind students that are like, oh no, it's easier to think about like a C scale with 7 sharps rather than 5 flats. That's a lot to remember. So it's important that they know both ways, but for continuing practice, just have them pick their favorite. Tips: don't rely on fingerings alone. That is true because if letters get skipped, they are not going to internalize the knowledge. Also, this is a big one. Don't rely on sheet music or memorization. Don't even entertain that as an idea. That is the main reason why I didn't understand like my scales or remember them the first 2 or maybe even 3 times that I learned them. The third time I had to know them for school, I just don't remember, like college entrance. I just don't know how I learned them. I don't remember. I don't remember if I approached them trying to learn it by rote or if I know I didn't use the circle of fifths, or if I used sheet music. The first 2 times, though, sorry, there's a cat walking around. um, I don't know which way I went, but I do know the first 2 times I had sheet music in front of me. All right, little one. Yeah, I know she's a cutie, but she said hi. Okay. All right. So, yeah, that's the thing. Use only the circle of fifths sheet for that. But when scales make their appearance in sheet music, make sure they know. Make sure they see that and be like, "Hey, do you know what that pattern is over there?" They'll be like, "Oh, that's a G scale." It's kind of cool. Also, I should complete a thought real quick. For piano, the order that I generally go is what key sharps. So C, G, D, A, E, B. B starts to change things. I will change like 2, or I will use 2 different types of finger patterns with that. Then I do it's what we call the VW scale pattern. It's kind of like these match up on the groups of 3 black keys, and these match up on the groups of 2 black keys, with thumbs in the middle. And then after F sharp and after C sharp, see the string player in me likes to think in sharps. Then I do A flat, E flat, B flat, and then I finish with a nice easy F. Okay, so that way, like the ones that have some flats in them, it's each one that you teach, you gradually take away one, but still keeping the VW pattern. Okay, if you have questions on that, let me know. All right, number 3, what is random? So you'll see in some of my resources there, like the chart, you'll see a category that says random. What is that? Because it is important to learn all 12/15 major scales, but that column at the end there says random because in order for actual recall to happen and actual memorization for these to go past sensory recall, students should be able to do this without the circle of fifths and in a random order, truly random order, not just chromatic order, which is a great practice tool, but truly random. Can they do it? Usually, on average, especially if you're as inconsistent with scale teaching like I am, there's other things that get in the way. We don't do it every week. Um, I usually like to try out different ways of testing students on random recall. Okay, it does take about as long as teaching the scales initially, sometimes shorter. It really just depends on how often you the teacher are on them about this and how often they are told to practice this. Okay, students will remember the easy scales the most because they were easy. They will remember the most recent, but they will forget the ones in between. So random is at the end because it encourages students to recall scales out of context, which is a real world skill. So, helping students handle random. Spend time going through each scale in order. That's to help them understand the pattern and how they're all related. And it should be something to practice for a week, each new one. Then make sure they can do it without the circle of fifths. So, like, actually be like, okay, let's do C. Okay, let's do G. Let's do D. So that they know that it's the order that you've taught them. Um, and if you have a different order that's more suitable for the student or for the instrument, absolutely be consistent with that order with them. Tell them that they know and will remember more than they think they do when they're not using that circle of fifths sheet, because it's easy to get very reliant on it. After they go through all the scales the first time without help in a random order, tell them that it will never be this difficult. That is true, actually. Sometimes it takes an entire 30-minute lesson, but it never takes that long ever again, especially if the students are practicing it. All right, so expanding this and keeping motivation high. Be sure that students are taking a step back and realizing that they are improving and that it is getting easier. Number two, a progress chart. This is amazing. So this is literally like a chart, okay? Their names are on one side, and then there's a column for each and every scale, with the last one being random, okay? They can use their first name. I have first name, last initial. But if students want to be, or if you want students to be more anonymous with this, have them pick an avatar or like an, I say an IGN because they'll know what that means, an in game name, kind of like in video games, like a username. Uh, I do check marks and underlines. Check marks mean it's done. Underlines mean we have worked on it and it's in process. And that's my system to help me keep track of where students are with this. Okay, which one have we learned last? Okay. You could do prizes. I don't do prizes. The prizes, they got the knowledge and they understand that. They actually do. If it sounds mean to you, put in prizes. Piece of candy, sticker, whatever. Um, but it's up to you. Gamifying random. How to make this fun in the lesson experience. Two dice, and each face has a letter name on it. A D20. Wait, I said a D20. I meant a D12. I totally put the wrong one on there. I mean, you could do a D20. Actually, I had a student come up with an idea for a D20 for me. If you don't know what that is, it's a Dungeons and Dragons reference, which I actually do play, which I'm so used to saying, take out a D20. In fact, I do that in lessons too, and I think that's why I typoed here. But I actually had students be like, well, that's okay, because numbers 13 through 20, you could have them be like user's choice. Like we could pick it. Or I had another student be like, "Well, for the rest of those, why don't you just put our hardest ones on there?" So, like, it's not out of the realm of possibilities of actually using a D20. You're just gonna have to like write down what 13 through 20 are gonna represent. But like the having like say number 13 is B and they always mess up B, like that's not a bad idea. But a D12 will be like equal one per side. Flashcards. Students choose a method. Sometimes they get creative with it. Number five, listing the ones that aren't right after the first or second try for quicker practicing. Okay, so it took you 3 times to be able to get your E scale down. All right, let's put this one as a top priority for practicing. A practice plan for drilling, I actually included that. A scale B. For all your students learning scales right now, do a scale B and do that for prizes. And I'm sure there's limitless ideas. Expansion. So, what happens when students complete random for major scales, 1 octave major scales? So, I actually have 3 of those charts up on my board because I have students that finished it. There's one for minor scales, and I teach them all 3. Multiple octave scales, which actually is really important for piano and strings because string students get quizzed on that, and piano students at certain difficulty levels, experience levels, they should know how to do it. Arpeggios could work, other types of scales could work. You could do whole tone, you could do contrary, you could do blues scales. I mean, you've got enough options to last a whole student's career with you, really. Next steps, application of use. What do we do with the scale knowledge after we finish all of this? Or in the midst of completing all of this? Key signature knowledge and application. You can do that right away with every single new scale that you learn. What's the key signature? And then application of that. Chord building. Okay, so this is how we get a major chord and a minor chord from here, and so on. Songwriting, because I swear, like most of my students ask me that at some point during their time with me. How do I write a song? Designing chord progressions. which is good for guitar. Fake book or lead sheet music, and I have another resource for that. Competitions, whether they're yours or through school, and literally anything else theory related. It all starts with scales. That's where all the knowledge has to come from. Long term effects. Everything gets easier. Everything music based gets easier. Even if they can't see that initially, it really truly does. And you should know that yourself as a professional. How music, melody, and harmony work together is no longer a mystery, and everything is decoded. Creative projects are no longer daunting. They can see how people can make those decisions rather than be overwhelmed with choices. And if you need more help and if you have questions, just throw me an email because, there's a lot of specific things that can be tailored and changed. I mean, I was referring to strings often and piano the most in the area of instruction and the delivery of this, but like, what about the other instruments? There's a lot of different paths to go, and I encourage you to actually, like, reach out to me to be like, "So, oh, how do you handle this for trombone? How do you handle this for cello?" Like, cello can get a little bit weird with the order because of, well, what if they don't know extended position yet? They may have to learn it or hold off, you know? They don't have to learn it all at once. Some instruments, that's not bad, like, I do, 1, 2, high 3, touch 4 as a, scale pattern for violin and viola, but, like, what happens for, like, F sharp and C sharp? Usually I teach them second position. Are they ready for that yet? You know? And feel free to disagree with me. They're just finger patterns. A lot of us have our favorite ways of doing that. I do find out with the 1, 2, high 3 touch 4 methodology, we have to go back and review letters. Like, we have to. But if you've got another way that does it all at once, by all means, this is just how to get students continuing with their knowledge and how to incorporate all the theory knowledge with it. Okay. So, yeah, absolutely feel free and reach out. And yeah, I hope all this really helps. I hope this helps with the motivating attitudes towards scales and feeling like, okay, this is not going to be so bad anymore. And, you know, getting students excited to actually continue this knowledge as their step one to learning music theory. All right. All right. Reach out with any questions, and I hope to see you in some of my other courses. Thank you so much.